Okay, so N.K Jemisin's The Fifth Season. This book has been getting a lot of buzz recently because, well, there's going to be an adaptation for one, but for two, the series won a Hugo Award 3 years in a row, which is the first time anything like that has happened. You know, having read the first book at this point, I can see it. That is not a statement of confidence, though. This takes place in a world that is racked by cataclysmic events every so often called seasons. In, this case, they call it the fifth season. And basically what this is like poison gas descends upon the world, or, something else, or like earthquakes or volcanoes happen, things like that. And in this world, there are people called orbiters. Basically what those people can do is they can redirect kinetic energy. And this is quite important when volcanoes and seismic events are very important, because they can redirect the seismic energy into something a little bit more mundane, or they can just pull the heat out of the air to freeze things. That's the common way that they can kill a person, usually by accident. This is another one in the long line of fantasy works that has started to go down the I'm not Tolkien path, in which they make it evidently clear that they are trying to be a standard fantasy setting. Fine, as far as I'm concerned, but there does seem to be a little bit of insecurity about that in the world building. Everything seems to be built in a completely different way, completely on purpose. This has weird sci-fi elements to it. So much so that the magic in this world is weirdly clinical. And I just don't really feel any sense of whimsy or, there's no... I wouldn't say there's a feeling associated with the magic to me. Like, Brandon Sanderson in a lot of his works tends to associate flight with freedom. I don't know if anyone's picked up on that. But the magic in this world doesn't seem to be associated with a particular, emotion or anything. And it doesn't seem to have any sort of a sense of whimsy to it. It's just kind of a tool to get the job done within the story. And it feels very focused around, how do you move the gears of this plot? Which is weird, because this is a decisively character-focused story. We follow one character from childhood into middle age, and throughout her entire growth she has 3 different names, and as such, I didn't remember any of them.
Hello, Cheryl.
It's Carol.
What? Since when?
Since I had it legally changed because you always call me Carol.
With other characters showing up every now and then that mostly just feel like props within the story to me. The mentor figure that shows up in the middle chapter, I guess you'd call it, mostly just feels like he exists, slap our main character on the back of the head and say there are other ways of doing things. And a kid that just sort of seems like he's there to be mysterious. I don't know, I'm not going to finish the series. I wasn't that interested. It's kind of a character-focused story where I don't really have any feelings or connections to any of the characters. If I were to describe this series in a way, I would say it's a perfectly calibrated machine for going north, but it's useless if you want to go in any other direction. The last thing that really jumps out to me about this series is, I don't know if anyone has noticed this, but I have a tendency of, when I talk about stories, I tend to talk about the subtext a lot, and I also tend to talk about the background meaning of things and what the story was inspired by and the thought process behind that. So, I'll describe Warhammer 40,000 as Paradise Lost by way of the Foundation. And that's a pretty accurate summary if you're aware of those 2 stories. I imagine I'd lose people if they're unaware of Paradise Lost or the Foundation series, but whatever. And as such, I noticed that I tend to be a little bit more sensitive to subtextual meanings compared to some other D-greens on the internet.
The past must die, it's awful, it's horrible, move past it.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
I'm never letting that go. And as such, I had a problem with this book because it more or less felt like I was being preached at. The political subtext, if you see it, is blinding, and I really couldn't pay attention to much else. The very obvious metaphor in a lot of the world building and a lot of the way that people think about things, for example, Roger is a slur that's used for the orbiters, the people who can redirect kinetic energy, right? is so fucking obviously the N-word that it's difficult not to notice that. And there's like a particular moment at some point in the story where they come across these stations that are situated throughout the entire world, throughout the entirety of this empire, right? This couldn't be a more obvious metaphor for slavery, for American slavery, if the author was trying. And I'm pretty sure she fucking was. As such, most of my thought process behind when I was reading this book wasn't caught up in getting enchanted into the world and dealing with that. It's, okay, what ham-fisted political message is the author going to try and push next? I feel like this is the same problem that things like Atlas Shrugged tend to have. It's not so much that it's getting overtly political, it's that both authors seem to have constructed a world in which their political ideology is true, and to not agree with that is to be willfully blind of reality. Both Ayn Rand and N.K Jemisin seem to offer their distorted views of the world up as what they think is a mirror of reality, but it's really not. Basically, I found this to be a character-focused story in which character took a backseat to political grandstanding, which is why I'm unsurprised that it won a Hugo Award, because that tends to be the thing that does well. You preach to the choir, and the choir gives you cheers. But for me, I found a lot of the clumsy metaphors in this, the clumsy metaphors and awkward analogies in this, to be off-putting. And I'm not really going to get into my basic opinion around a lot of, like, issues of slavery and discrimination and racism in the United States. My opinion is, go listen to John McWhorter. That's my opinion. If there's a lesson to be learned here, it's that if you want to try and have political themes in your book, you should probably have a more cohesive understanding of the arguments surrounding this, because it really is not convincing anyone who isn't already converted. Though I do have to imagine some people did completely not notice this sort of thing, and that's fine. Or maybe I'm the one reading into it too much, I don't know. But for me, a lot of the story felt like a slightly better worded PSA.
Now we know!
And like I always say, remember, you know enough.